something I did find which is quite heartbreaking. Welcome to Precision Bodge. So we're starting the big single turbo build for my RX7. I'm going to start off removing this. This is disgusting. It might be a fire hazard. So the plan is all this is coming off, the air pump, all that emission control is coming off. Stock airbox coming off, stock intercooler and all this is coming off. I'm gonna have probably gonna make a V-mount setup. So I want to keep the aircon. Ooh. Not sure if that's a good sign, but it's definitely full of oil. And my rear turbo, when I was on the car, you could see lots of oil dripping from it, so maybe it's a good thing I'm doing it now. Because maybe one of the oil seals went on the turbo. This is the factory intercooler. It's really tiny, so no surprise that so many people upgrade them. So you can see there's a lot more room in here now to install other stuff. But I'm going to carry on taking it apart. Definitely not been cleaned in a while. As you can see, there's a lot more room now opened up, but I'm going to carry on removing stuff. The factory radiator actually sits this way. I'm pretty sure that with V-mount setups, the radiators put like this, so you have a radiator here and intercooler like this. It's the air duct for the intercooler. Wouldn't be using this, but I'm keeping it. So I was thinking of using this intercooler. This intercooler wasn't my Daihatsu. It looks a bit beat up down here, but I just had to massage it for clearance. Not sure if it will be actually good enough to 400 to 500-ish horsepower that I'm aiming for, but we'll see. But at the moment, I'm actually on a time crunch and actually on a money crunch, so I'm doing stuff as quickly and as cheaply as possible. For now, not cheaping out on main bits, but stuff like this, stuff I can reuse, I'm just doing it for now. So I think it will actually be really good here in a V-mount setup. Maybe something a little bit bigger, but might actually be fine. So in theory, it's going to be something like this. But of course I need to cover this up so air actually goes through the intercooler and not around it here. So now I'm going to start removing the air pump and the factory twin turbos. That was not even on. So it was never actually, turns out that wasn't even connected up, so there was a massive grease leak. You had a coolant leak here, so this will definitely need to be addressed, and looks like there's coolant leaks in a few other places, which isn't good for rotaries, or any engine to be fair. This thing just fell apart and it's all so brittle. This is a vacuum line. It's the massive rat's nest problem. There's a vacuum line missing on this one, and they just look bad. So good thing it's coming off. This feels like plastic. It's meant to be rubber. Full of oil. So removed a few things off camera. removed the air pump and some vacuum lines for it. Air pump, you're thinking, what is that? But these were so bad for emissions, even in the 90s, that they required an air pump just to pass emissions on idle. This is how bad these are. Of course, I'm removing it and removing these factory twins because I'm putting a big single on. So this is what is being put on. It looks massive, but it's actually not that big. I mean, it's big, but it's not that big. So it's a Garrett turbo. This is actually off a Scania truck, and it's got a billet wheel. I don't know the exact specs of it off the top of my head, but I think this turbo is a bit bigger than TO4Z, but it's newer technology, because TO4Z is a quite common and go-to turbo for RX7s, especially. Like, it's a common build thing, but they're a bit outdated. And truck turbos, they might look big and just like they take forever to spool and that stuff, but that's actually not the case, because in the truck industry there's so much development in turbos. Lots of actually aftermarket turbos get the stuff on them after they're actually done in industry first, just because they need to meet the emission standards, power standards, everything, and it's so tight in them that they actually make really good turbos. This quite modern turbo, it's from a 2014 onwards truck. So, but yeah, it's got billet wheel, it's got an internal wastegate, but the problem with these internal wastegates, they're small, and it actually only, the wastegate actually only works for one runner, which doesn't make it a good twin scroll turbo thing. Most trucks, they actually have a gasket, but that doesn't actually utilize this twin scroll design, which I don't know why they do it like that, but it's just how it's done. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this apart somehow, I'll find out how, and weld this up so block off the wastegate. And I've got two 38mm external wastegates that will bleed off the air from each rotor, so that should be good enough for boost control. This turbo is only oil cooled, which isn't really that great, but quite a lot of big turbos are like this and they're fine. And yeah, it's not that good for cooling, but putting this on and getting rid of factory twins will be a massive upgrade in cooling. What else about this turbo? It's a 0.94 twin scroll exhaust housing, which is normally a little bit small, but with these truck turbos, they actually have pretty big turbine wheels. So smaller housing, but bigger turbine wheel. It means there wouldn't be that much back pressure, which what you don't want with rotaries. I think it'd be fine. It's just an experiment, but we'll see. This is a 4-inch dump, but I've got a 3-inch exhaust. What I'll do is I'll taper it down to 3.5, then 4-inch. And yeah, it should fit quite nicely on here. Of course, I'll need to clock the turbo, so rotate it and Z-axis to make it properly fit the way I want. But I think in here it will be. It's a very good fit. Of course, quite a lot more stuff that has to come off and everything, but this will be good. So this will probably be rotated this way or something, so I can feed the intercooler. You're not going to get an RX7 one because they come with RX7 tacks. I'm going to measure it up and just buy a universal alloy radiator and make it fit. I can make mounts, so that's not a problem. So why would I spend 300-400 quid on a proper radiator when I can find one for 100, 150 or something like that? We'll see. So it's been a few days since I've worked on this. So took apart some stuff. So we took the intake manifold off, and there's some silicone on here. This engine seems to be in very good condition for the mileage it's done. So it's either had an engine rebuilt or it has a factory replacement engine. Don't know. So I took off the intake manifold. Quite a lot of hoses were brittle, as to be expected, and this is the rat's nest. It's awful. there's 60 something, I think 60 vacuum lines, and after a while they go brittle because literally they're in so much heat, and this causes so many problems with RX7s. It causes boost problems, it causes overboost, and so many other things that I just don't want to mess around with. That's why I'm going single turbo. It's really cool. They made a sequential twin turbo system in the early 90s that was probably designed in 80s, but it's just too complex and it's just well out of date. So it's been roughly half an hour. Literally, I just pulled it off. You can see so many vacuum hoses, so many connectors for different solenoids, and all that. It's just some rusty coolant. So just so complex. Like, I do admire the engineering behind this, because the technology they had and what they managed to achieve is really cool. But now it's just so outdated. You can actually see how little this engine is, how small it is. And all this has still got to come out because I'm not keeping any of this. I'll put this in storage just in case if I ever go back to stock, but I highly doubt it, because most of these things are broken. And this took me half an hour longer to pull out because I had to fight with every single vacuum line. I just couldn't take any of them off because they're so brittle. Something I did find, which is quite heartbreaking, is the oil feed lines for the oil injectors are dry. So I've roughly done 600-ish kilometers on this car since I bought it after it's been in storage. So potentially all this time it has been running without oil. But a blessing in disguise, to be fair. The rear turbo was a little bit and it was pissing oil into the intake that we saw lots of oil in the intake. So I think that a lot of oil in the intake actually helped this engine survive and not have any problems. So potentially the engine the rotors actually got enough oil in them through the broken turbo and didn't cause any damage. So yeah, so sometimes it's good to have broken shit on your car. So I'm trying to remove the stock downpipe, and because this is a right-hand drive, there's so little room here. I mean, I really don't want to do this, but I think I'm going to have to. I don't want to take the steering rod off, whatever you call it, because then I'll mess up my steering and then might not get in the exact same spot and mess around with that. But this stud here, you can't even see it, but this stud here that holds the downpipe on is just too much in a way. It might have backed out, or it's just too long, and I don't know the correct procedure for doing this, but for now I'm just gonna cut that stud in order to remove the downpipe. That didn't work. The only thing it did was blunt my blades because it's a hardened stud, which is good that Mazda made good quality studs, but bad because this is such a pain to remove. So I don't know what to do now. I can't take the rod off. I tried actually taking the rod off and it's stuck. So more messing around. Attempt number 2 with a new blade. We'll see if this works and it's longer. So the struggle continues. I've loosened this steering rod thing. It's not budging. I cannot cut that stud that's hardened, so I'm gonna try. I'm gonna loosen the steering rack and push it forward, and hopefully undo that rod to get the downpipe off. Cut the 2 top studs off with an angle grinder, and the bottom is still there. I'm not sure you can see it, but I've tried cutting it with a, yeah, you can't see it, but all the way in there. See, there's just so little room, like, what is this? Try cutting it, not cutting it. Try hitting it with a hammer and like with a chisel, snapping it, that's not happening. I'm so annoyed. I do not recommend you do this like this, but this is C's already taken the steering rack off and everything. Not off, but just loosened it and pushed it all out the way. Made as much things as I can come off, and it's still not coming off, so I'm gonna grind it down with some carbide bit and hopefully he actually takes that bloody stud. After hammering out of it, I mean the stud didn't actually snap, but somehow I hammered it enough for the downpipe to come off. That was horrible. I am keeping parts just in case if I ever decide to convert it to stock, but you know what? That's definitely not going to happen. The downpipe came off because the stud actually bent out the way, because there was no way it was going to come off with a stud there, but it bent roughly by 20 degrees and it was just enough. So yeah, now the turbos can bloody come off. This bolt was loose. I definitely didn't loosen that one. There's a bolt missing here, and yeah, I'm not sure what these are, but that's definitely been apart at one point. So that's not even the stock bolt, it's just a random bolt. It's been a few solid hours, but the turbos are finally out. They've definitely been apart before, because there's Loctite in some places, which made it even harder to pull off, because there's not a little bit of Loctite, there's a lot of Loctite. I can still see like the threads are completely blue. These turbos have a bit of play in them. Journal bearing turbos have play in them, that's normal, but these have started contact in the housing. This is the front one, and the rear one was actually leaking oil badly. You can still see oil on it, and this was much worse. So I just took the exhaust manifold off. There's some silicone on these gaskets, same silicone that's actually on the intake manifold. So this engine has been apart before, or at least had the turbos apart. But judging by the condition of the engine, how well it starts on hot, and the mileage, I think it's definitely been rebuilt before. And this is pretty much it. Most of the things I wanted to take off I have. This actually took quite a number of days, but I've only had a few hours or a few minutes sometimes to work on the car in between days. So got the turbos off. It was an absolute pain to remove them. Still need to remove my OMP pump, because that's actually broken, as we found out earlier. Take a couple of things off, paint them up, but this engine has been rebuilt, or had the turbos off and everything, but it has such good compression, I think it's definitely been rebuilt. Still need to figure out the pulley setup and everything, but that'll be sometime later. Now I'm just going to be removing some boring bits, remove the wiring harness, because I'm definitely not going to be using most of them. I'll have to reuse some plugs. I'll try to deepin them or cut and make my own wiring harness, because I'm going full aftermarket ECU. From my Daihatsu, but I'll be able to use it on the Daihatsu and the RX7 until I can afford to have two ECUs. I'm going to remove some more bits and stuff. It's pretty boring and self-explanatory. And next video will be big single build. So I think I already showed what turbo I'm going to be using. That's it. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff, and if there's any tips that you want to give on disassembly or just any other tips, feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you.